Hey everybody! In today's video, I'm going to be talking about mobile internet, how we stay connected while we're working from the road. We actually use a combination of 4 internet connections to make it happen, which might sound like overkill. There are a lot of options out there for mobile internet, so I'm going to cover today what has worked for us and what I know most about, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best option for you. Hopefully, you'll learn something that'll help you along with your journey. I'm going to start with the basics, and then later in the video, I'll dive into some of the technical details of how we actually have our network configured to support remote work. So let's dive in. Here's a quick overview of our setup. In our setup, our primary internet connection comes from a Starlink High Performance satellite that's permanently mounted to the roof of the motorhome. When it comes to the setup, I was initially apprehensive about drilling into the roof, both to mount the Starlink satellite as well as routing the cables into the cabinet inside where we keep all of our networking equipment. But I was pleasantly surprised. They provide a lot of instructions, and thanks to some helpful YouTube videos, I was able to get it set up in just under a couple of hours. When it comes to price, the Starlink High Performance kit is a bit more expensive than their standard dish. The monthly cost is also a little bit higher if you want it enabled for in-motion use to keep you connected while you're driving down the road. For us, we were okay with the higher price simply to take advantage of the convenience of not having to set up and tear down our dish every time we move to a new campground, because we plan to move every couple weeks for the next few years. There are some considerations though before mounting the dish to your roof. Unlike the portable dish, if you arrive to a campground and your site is covered by trees, you don't have the flexibility of moving the dish into a spot with better sight of the sky. We'll talk a little bit about how we plan to mitigate that later on. Our second internet connection is something we've been using for quite a while, long before Starlink became popular, and that's T-Mobile Home Internet. It comes at a fixed cost of $50 a month for unlimited data, and it works anywhere you have T-Mobile coverage. It's advertised as home internet, and they don't say anywhere on their website that it can be used portably, but we've been using it for about 3 years with no issues. Our third internet connection is actually our original Starlink dish. When we installed the high performance dish on the roof, we decided not to get rid of our original equipment, mainly because you can pause the monthly service plan and it doesn't take up much room in the RV to carry it around. This way, if we do get to a site where the roof dish doesn't have great visibility, we can pull out the portable dish, set it up somewhere with line of sight to the sky, and reactivate that plan to get us back online. Since the standard Starlink setup is what most people will end up going with, I'm going to share a couple of pros and cons from our time using it as our primary internet connection. Number 1 is the price. It's fairly affordable to purchase the equipment if you need access to the internet on the road, and the monthly plans being able to be paused when you're not using it also make it appealing to people who are traveling in an RV. There are only 2 cons that I can think of during our time using standard Starlink. Number 1's around visibility. If you do end up needing to put the dish in a spot to get better sight of the sky, you may end up having cables all over your campground. We've actually seen a couple horror stories where people put their dish too close to the road and it ends up getting backed over by a car. There are a variety of mounts though. We've taken advantage of the Flagpole Buddy, which allows one person to easily set up and take down the satellite dish and keeps it elevated above your roofline for a better line of sight to the sky. The only other con I can think of is around quality of service. If you're on their mobility plan, which runs $150 a month, you're technically getting deprioritized data. If you're somewhere very rural where there aren't very many Starlinks around, it's probably no problem. But if you're like us and you tend to travel towards larger cities and large campgrounds where they have multiple Starlinks in place, you will find that your speeds are quite a bit lower than you expect, but they've never been so slow that we couldn't get work done. Last but not least is our fourth internet connection, which is an AT&T Cellular plan built into our Peplink router. We really only use this in a pinch if we aren't able to get another connection for some reason, and we activate it on their prepaid network for $55 a month for 50 gigabytes of data. Again, it's not ideal. We really try to avoid things with limits, but it works if we have no other options available to us. The cons of this are inherently with any cellular connection, there's going to be quite a bit of latency, and if you're traveling, the connection can cut out quite frequently. So you're probably asking yourself, how does this all work together? And the answer is our Peplink router. We have a Peplink MAX BR1 Pro 5G router installed in the motorhome that manages all of these connections. This router has one hardwired WAN port, two Wi-Fi as WAN connections, and one cellular connection, although you can actually have two SIM cards in the router at a time, but only one can be active. In our setup, we have our high-performance Starlink hardwired into the WAN port. We use one of the Wi-Fi as WAN connections to keep our T-Mobile home internet connected all the time, and we use the other Wi-Fi as WAN connection if we decide to set up our portable Starlink, or we can connect it to campground Wi-Fi if it's available. We keep our AT&T SIM card in the router at all times, but we only activate that as needed, as I mentioned before. Peplink routers are extremely configurable and can seem overwhelming if you're just starting to research them. Trust me, when my buddy Keith told me that I would need one of these going full-time, I thought he was crazy, but since getting one, I've thanked him at least 100 times. The real beauty of the Peplink router is not just that it can handle multiple connections at once so that you're not unplugging and plugging things in or constantly jumping from one Wi-Fi network to the other, but they also offer a service called SpeedFusion. In a nutshell, as long as you have at least two active connections, SpeedFusion sends duplicate traffic over each so that if one of your connections happens to drop for a second, the traffic still makes it across the other connection. This is extremely important for folks like us who spend a lot of our time on video calls. SpeedFusion is doing all of the heavy lifting in the background, so when I'm on a video call and one of my internet connections isn't working quite as it should, no one on the call has any idea, and SpeedFusion keeps things running perfectly smooth. Peplink has made SpeedFusion fairly simple to set up. You can either send all of your internet traffic across it, only traffic from certain devices, or, like us, you can set up custom outbound policies so that only certain types of traffic make use of SpeedFusion. There is a data cap, but it's fairly inexpensive at about $40 per terabyte. Right now, we're going through about a terabyte every 2 to 3 months. Last but not least, streaming services like Netflix and Hulu have been cracking down on password sharing lately. So if you're traveling in an RV and your IP address is constantly changing, they may shut your account down thinking that you're sharing your account with people all across the country. The answer to this is SpeedFusion Connect Relay, another device from Peplink. Whether you still have a house that you can set this up in, or perhaps a family member that will let you plug it into their network and use a little bit of their bandwidth, SpeedFusion Connect Relay allows you to route traffic from your Peplink router through a specific location so that you're always coming from a consistent IP address. In our setup, we have the relay device running at one of our family members' houses, and our traffic from our Apple TV and our Roku routing through it so that Netflix and Hulu don't give us any problems. If you're interested in setting up SpeedFusion this way, I'm going to show a quick preview of our outbound policies so you can get an idea of how we have things configured. There are multiple ways to manage your Peplink devices, but the easiest is through their service called In Control. In Control, you can see all of your devices, manage their configuration, complete remote firmware upgrades, and much, much more. Sticking to our topic of how we route traffic through SpeedFusion, this is configured in Network Settings Outbound Policy. In our outbound policy, we try to keep this fairly simple, and we have a handful of rules. We have our blink devices basically picking whichever of our active internet connections have the lowest latency without taking advantage of any SpeedFusion. Our video streaming devices that would access Netflix and Hulu are configured to go across our relay connection that connects to the SpeedFusion Connect relay device at one of our family members' houses. We take advantage of the built-in configuration to identify traffic from services like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, WebEx, and Google Meet and send that traffic over the SpeedFusion connection to take advantage of bonding and smoothing and keep those connections crystal clear. Lastly, any traffic that does not meet those previous rules is routed based on priority, first through our high-performance Starlink connection, and then through any of our available Wi-Fi as WAN connections. Be sure to check the description below for links to some of the products and services that I've mentioned in this video, as well as some helpful resources that I followed while setting up my configuration. Also, let us know in the comments how you've decided to stay connected on the road. Until next time, signing off to find the sunshine, we are seeking 77 degrees.